The medical bay hummed with soft blue light as Dr. Alex Rivera adjusted the alien healing chamber for the third time that morning. The crystalline panels responded to her touch with musical chimes that her alien colleague Dr. Nim had explained were actually diagnostic frequencies. Around her, the most advanced medical facility in known space buzzed with activity as three different species worked side by side for the first time in galactic history. Dr. Nim floated near the main console, her translucent body catching and refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns. Her people, the Resonari, had evolved beyond physical medicine centuries ago, using harmonic frequencies to encourage cellular repair and regeneration. Beside her, Dr. Torvin moved with deliberate slowness, his slug-like form leaving a faint trail of healing secretions that could mend minor cuts instantly. The Mallory had never needed surgery because their bodies simply regrew whatever was damaged. At the far end of the bay, Dr. Kala swayed gently, her bark-like skin photosynthesizing the station's artificial sunlight into compounds that could neutralize most toxins and infections. Alex felt primitive by comparison. Her people had only reached the stars 50 years ago, and their medical technology still relied on what the aliens politely called mechanical intervention. The other species had invited humanity to this joint research station as a gesture of goodwill, expecting to share their advanced healing methods with a younger civilization. Alex suspected they also wanted to study human resilience, since her species had survived longer in hostile environments than most others. The cellular regeneration matrix is calibrated for human physiology, Dr. Nim sang, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Your people should find our methods much more comfortable than your current practices. Alex nodded politely, though she had her doubts. Human medicine had evolved through necessity, shaped by a fragile biology that could not heal itself. She had studied the alien methods extensively and found them elegant but limited. They worked beautifully for their respective species but seemed to assume that all injuries could be healed, given enough time and the right conditions. The morning's cultural exchange was interrupted by an emergency alarm that sent red lights flashing throughout the medical bay. A human technician named David had been crushed under a collapsed support beam in the engineering section. Alex grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the transport pad, her alien colleagues following with their own healing devices. They found David pinned beneath a massive piece of machinery, his breathing shallow and labored. His face was pale, and Alex could see the telltale signs of internal bleeding in his eyes and the way he held himself. The other technicians had managed to lift the beam, but the damage was already done. Dr. Nim immediately began setting up a harmonic resonance field around David, her crystalline form glowing brighter as she channeled healing frequencies. Dr. Torvin approached with a vial of his regenerative secretions, while Dr. Kala prepared a photosynthetic treatment that would help process any toxins in his system. Alex watched their readings for 30 seconds before her heart sank. David's blood pressure was dropping rapidly, and she could see signs of massive internal hemorrhaging. The alien healing methods were working, but they were too slow. David would bleed to death internally before the gentle regeneration could take effect. We need to operate now, Alex said, opening her emergency surgical kit. The three alien doctors stopped their work and stared at her. Dr. Nim's harmonic field flickered with what Alex had learned was confusion. Operate? You mean to cut into him? His liver is lacerated and he's bleeding internally. If we don't stop the bleeding surgically, he'll die in the next 10 minutes. Alex was already prepping her instruments, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Dr. Torvin recoiled, his entire body shuddering. You cannot seriously intend to cause more trauma to heal trauma. That is madness. It's medicine, Alex replied, injecting David with a local anesthetic. Sometimes you have to cause controlled damage to prevent worse damage. The aliens watched in horror as Alex made her first incision. To them, it looked like she was attacking an already injured being. Dr. Nim's crystalline form dimmed with distress, and Dr. Kala's leaves rustled with agitation. They had never seen anything like this. Deliberate wounding of a patient. Alex worked quickly, her hands steady despite the alien stares. She found the torn blood vessel and began suturing it closed, her movements precise and economical. To her, this was routine emergency surgery, but she could hear Dr. Torvin making distressed sounds behind her. "In my culture," Dr. Torvin said, quietly, "to deliberately harm another being is the greatest sin. How can you call this healing?" Alex didn't look up from her work. "Because he'll live. Your regenerative secretions are amazing, but they can't work fast enough to save him from this kind of injury. Sometimes the body needs help that it can't provide for itself." Dr. Nim's harmonic field began to resonate with uncertainty. "But you are causing him pain. You are damaging healthy tissue to reach the injured area. This seems like violence disguised as medicine." "He's unconscious," Alex said, checking David's vitals. "And yes, I'm cutting through healthy tissue, but only to reach the injury. Think of it like pruning a tree to help it grow better." Dr. Kalla's leaves rustled with something that might have been understanding. "We photosynthesize damage away over time. But time is not available here." "Exactly." Alex finished the internal sutures and began closing the incision. "Human medicine developed because we don't have your natural healing abilities. We're fragile, so we had to learn to fix ourselves quickly and efficiently." The aliens watched in fascination and horror as Alex completed the surgery. David's vital signs stabilized and his color began to return. The procedure that had taken 20 minutes would have required hours or days using their gentler methods. Time that David simply did not have. Dr. Nim's crystalline form pulsed with conflicted emotions. "He lives, but at what cost? You have violated the integrity of his body." "I've preserved his life," Alex said simply. "In human medicine, we believe that temporary violation of bodily integrity is acceptable if it prevents permanent damage or death. We call it the principle of necessary harm." Dr. Torvin moved closer, his slug-like form trembling. "Your species deliberately learns to overcome your natural revulsion to harming others?" Alex nodded. "Medical students train for years to be able to cut into living beings. We practice on cadavers first, then work with supervision until we can perform surgery without hesitation. It's not natural for us either, but we do it because the alternative is watching people die." The three alien doctors exchanged glances, their different forms of communication creating a complex web of light, sound, and chemical signals. Alex realized they were having a conversation she couldn't fully understand, but she could sense their deep discomfort with what they had witnessed. David began to stir, and Alex checked his bandages. The surgery had been successful, but she knew the real test would come in the following hours. She also knew that her alien colleagues would never look at human medicine the same way again. "How often do your people perform such procedures?" Dr. Kalla asked, her voice carrying a note of something between curiosity and dread. Alex considered the question. "Every day, somewhere on Earth, emergency surgery, planned operations, trauma response, organ transplants. It's routine for us." The aliens fell silent, and Alex realized that their first cultural exchange had revealed something about humanity that they had never expected to encounter. To them, humans appeared to be a species that had turned violence into healing, that had made harming others into an act of compassion. As David's breathing deepened and his vital signs continued to improve, Alex began to understand that this was just the beginning of a much larger conversation about what it meant to heal, what it meant to help, and what prices different species were willing to pay to preserve life. The observation deck overlooked the station's central hub, where beings from dozens of species moved through the corridors like a living rainbow. Dr. Alex Rivera sat across from her three alien colleagues, each nursing their preferred form of sustenance while the events of the morning settled in their minds. David had been moved to recovery, his vital signs stable, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Dr. Nim's crystalline form cast prismatic shadows across the table as she processed what she had witnessed. Her people communicated through harmonic resonance, and Alex could hear the subtle, discordant notes that indicated deep distress. The Resonari had evolved past physical medicine because their cellular structure responded to specific frequencies, allowing them to heal from within without ever breaking the skin. I have been consulting with the medical archives of my people, Dr. Nim said finally, her voice carrying undertones of confusion. In 3,000 years of recorded history, no Resonari has ever deliberately harmed another to provide healing. The concept does not exist in our language. Dr. Torvin shifted uncomfortably, his slug-like form secreting a thin layer of stress pheromones. My people regenerate lost limbs within days. If a Mallory is injured, we simply wait for the body to rebuild itself. The idea of cutting away healthy tissue to reach damaged tissue is like destroying a house to repair a single room. Alex sipped her coffee, letting the aliens process their thoughts. She had expected this reaction, but living through it was more intense than she had imagined. To them, human medicine must seem like organized barbarism, a systematic approach to causing harm in the name of healing. "Tell me about your training," Dr. Kala requested, her bark-like skin rustling with curiosity. "How does your species learn to overcome the natural reluctance to harm others?" Alex set down her cup and considered how to explain medical school to beings who had never needed to learn invasive procedures. "We start with books and simulations, learning anatomy and physiology. Then we practice on preserved bodies, cadavers, to understand the structure of the human form without causing harm to living beings." The three aliens recoiled simultaneously. Dr. Nim's harmonic field flickered with revulsion, while Dr. Torvin's entire body contracted into a tight spiral. Dr. Kala's leaves turned a sickly yellow color. "You practice on the dead?" Dr. Torvin whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's the only way to learn," Alex explained gently. "We need to understand how the body is put together before we can fix it when it's broken. The dead no longer need their bodies, so they can help train the living to heal the living." Dr. Nim's crystalline form began to resonate with a low, mournful tone. Among the Resonari, disturbing the dead is considered the deepest spiritual violation. The harmonic patterns of a deceased being must be allowed to fade naturally into the cosmic frequency. Alex nodded respectfully. "Different species, different customs?" For humans, using the dead to teach healing is considered honorable. Medical students spend years learning to cut precisely, to suture cleanly, to navigate the body's structure without causing unnecessary damage. "But you are still causing damage," Dr. Kala pointed out. "You speak of necessary harm and controlled damage as if pain and injury can be positive things." "Sometimes they can be," Alex said, pulling up a holographic display of human medical procedures. "Look at this. A human with a diseased appendix will die if we don't remove it. Yes, we have to cut through healthy tissue to reach the diseased organ, but the alternative is death from infection." The aliens studied the display with a mixture of fascination and horror. To them, it looked like a sequence of deliberate mutilation, but Alex could see them beginning to understand the logic behind it. "Your species lacks natural regeneration," Dr. Torvin observed. "So you developed artificial regeneration through mechanical intervention." "That's one way to put it," Alex agreed. "We also developed chemotherapy, which involves poisoning the entire body to kill cancer cells. We perform amputations, deliberately removing healthy limbs to prevent infection from spreading. We do organ transplants, taking organs from one person and putting them in another." Dr. Nim's harmonic field reached a pitch that made Alex's teeth ache. "You remove parts of one being and place them in another? How is that not a violation of individual essence?" Alex brought up another display showing a successful heart transplant. "A human with a failing heart will die. Another human, brain dead from an accident, has a healthy heart that will die with them. We can take the healthy heart and use it to save the first person's life." "But then the first person is living with part of someone else inside them," Dr. Kala said, her voice filled with something approaching horror. "How can they remain themselves?" "Because the heart is just a muscle that pumps blood," Alex explained. "It doesn't contain personality or memories or soul. It's just a biological machine that can be replaced when it breaks." The concept seemed to shake the aliens to their core. Dr. Torvin's entire form was trembling, and Dr. Nim's crystalline structure was refracting light in chaotic patterns. Dr. Kala's bark had turned almost black with distress. You treat your bodies like machines. Dr. Nim said finally, replacing parts, cutting away sections, poisoning systems to destroy disease. This is not healing as we understand it. It's healing as we understand it, Alex replied. Our bodies are biological machines, in a sense. Complex ones, but machines nonetheless. When a machine breaks, you fix it. When a part fails, you replace it. When a system is corrupted, you clean it. Dr. Torvin looked up from his contemplation. But what about the pain, the trauma, the violation of the body's integrity? Alex leaned forward. We've developed ways to manage pain. Anesthetics to render patients unconscious during procedures. Painkillers to ease recovery. We accept that temporary suffering is worthwhile if it prevents permanent damage or death. Your people have chosen to embrace pain as a tool of healing, Dr. Kala said slowly. This is why your medicine appears violent to us. You have made suffering into a medicine. We've made controlled suffering into a way to prevent uncontrolled suffering, Alex corrected. A few hours of surgical pain to prevent a lifetime of disability. A few weeks of chemotherapy to prevent death from cancer. A few minutes of amputation to prevent death from infection. The aliens sat in contemplative silence, each processing this information according to their own cultural frameworks. Alex realized that she was witnessing a fundamental clash of philosophies about life, death, and the nature of healing itself. Dr. Nim's harmonic field began to stabilize into a more thoughtful pattern. Your species has taken its greatest weakness and transformed it into a strength. Because you cannot heal naturally, you have learned to heal artificially. That's exactly right, Alex said. We're fragile, so we developed ways to be strong. We're mortal, so we developed ways to fight death. We feel pain, so we learned to use pain as a diagnostic tool and healing method. Dr. Torvin's stress pheromones began to subside. In a sense, your medicine is an expression of your species' refusal to accept biological limitations. We work with what we have, Alex said. And what we have is intelligence, determination, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to preserve life. Dr. Kala's bark began to return to its normal color. Even if it means causing harm to prevent greater harm. Alex nodded. Even then, we've learned that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is cause controlled pain to prevent uncontrolled suffering. The conversation continued as the alien doctors began to grapple with concepts that challenged their most basic assumptions about medicine, healing, and the nature of compassion itself. Alex realized that this exchange was changing all of them, forcing each species to confront their own limitations and assumptions about what it meant to heal. As the station's artificial day cycle began to dim, Alex looked out at the bustling hub below and wondered what other fundamental differences would emerge as their species continued to work together. The medical bay was just the beginning of a much larger conversation about how different forms of intelligence approached universal problems. David's successful surgery had opened a door that could never be closed, revealing to the galaxy that human medicine was not primitive brutality but rather the ultimate expression of a species' refusal to surrender to death without a fight. The explosion tore through the station's industrial sector with the force of a miniature star, sending shock waves through the hull that made every being aboard feel the structure shudder around them. Dr. Alex Rivera was reviewing patient files. When the emergency klaxons began wailing, their harsh sound cutting through the medical bay's usual calm. Within seconds, her communicator crackled to life with reports of massive casualties from a plasma conduit failure that had devastated 3 entire decks. Emergency response teams were already mobilizing when Alex reached the transport pad, her field surgery kit slung over her shoulder. Dr. Nim materialized beside her, her crystalline form pulsing with urgent harmonics, while Dr. Torvin and Dr. Kala moved with uncharacteristic speed toward the disaster site. The aliens had never witnessed a large-scale emergency, and Alex could sense their growing anxiety as reports continued to pour in. The industrial sector looked like a war zone. Twisted metal and shattered equipment created a maze of debris, while emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the devastation. The plasma explosion had caught workers from multiple species in its path. creating a complex triage situation that would challenge even experienced human emergency responders. Alex immediately began assessing the casualties, her training taking over as she moved from victim to victim. A human engineer lay unconscious with severe burns covering 60% of his body. A resinari worker flickered weakly, her crystalline structure fractured in multiple places. Dr. Torvin himself had been caught in the blast's edge, his regenerative abilities overwhelmed by radiation poisoning that was actively preventing his cellular repair mechanisms from functioning. "We need to set up a field hospital," Alex called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario. Multiple trauma cases, mixed species, limited resources. The human medical team that arrived with the second wave moved with practiced efficiency, setting up treatment stations and sorting casualties by priority. Alex watched her alien colleagues observe this organized chaos with growing bewilderment. To them, it looked like humans were making arbitrary decisions about who lived and who died. "Why are you not treating the most severely injured first?" Dr. Nim asked, her harmonic field wavering with distress as she watched Alex pass by a critically wounded Zephyrian to treat a human with less severe injuries. "Triage," Alex replied tersely, not stopping her work. "We treat the ones most likely to survive first. The Zephyrian has injuries that would take hours to address, and we might lose him anyway. This human can be stabilized in minutes and will definitely live." The concept horrified the aliens. Dr. Kala's bark turned pale as she watched Alex make rapid decisions about who received immediate attention and who would have to wait. In their cultures, medical care was provided based on need, not probability of survival. Alex found herself working on Dr. Torvin, whose radiation poisoning had shut down his natural healing abilities. His slug-like form was swollen and discolored, and his cellular regeneration had not just stopped but reversed, causing tissue death throughout his body. The only treatment would be a bone marrow transplant, replacing his blood-producing cells with healthy ones from a compatible donor. "I need you to understand what this procedure involves," Alex explained to Dr. Torvin as she prepared the equipment. "We have to extract bone marrow from a donor and inject it into your bones. It will replace your damaged blood-producing cells with healthy ones." Dr. Torvin's entire form shuddered with revulsion. "You want to put parts of another being inside me? To replace my essential biological functions with foreign ones? It's the only way to save your life," Alex said gently. "The radiation has damaged your ability to produce healthy blood cells. Without the transplant, you'll die from organ failure within hours." The moral complexity of the situation was not lost on Alex. She was asking a being whose culture viewed bodily integrity as sacred to accept foreign biological material into his most essential systems. It was like asking someone to voluntarily become a different person to stay alive. Meanwhile, Dr. Kala had been caught in a secondary explosion that had burned through her bark-like skin and damaged her photosynthetic organs. Her people healed by processing sunlight into therapeutic compounds, but the burned areas could not photosynthesize and were actually blocking her natural healing processes. The only solution was skin grafts, taking healthy bark from one part of her body to cover the damaged areas. "You want to wound me in order to heal me?" Dr. Kala asked, her voice filled with disbelief as Alex explained the procedure. "I want to move healthy tissue from a place where you don't need it to a place where you do," Alex replied. "The burned areas can't heal themselves, but if we cover them with healthy skin, your body can rebuild from there." The alien doctors watched in horror as Alex's human team worked through the casualties with mechanical efficiency. They saw humans performing emergency amputations, removing limbs that were too damaged to save in order to prevent infection from spreading. They watched human medics cutting into patients' throats to help them breathe, inserting tubes into their bodies to drain fluid, and injecting powerful drugs that would have been lethal to healthy beings. "You are causing more trauma to already traumatized beings," Dr. Nim observed, her crystalline form dim with distress. "How can this be healing?" "Because the alternative is death," Alex replied without looking up from her work. "Sometimes we have to choose between bad options and worse options. We choose the bad ones to prevent the worse ones. The human medical team had been working for 6 hours straight, and Alex could see the toll it was taking on them. Emergency. Medicine was exhausting under the best circumstances, but working with unfamiliar alien physiologies while being observed by horrified alien colleagues added another layer of stress. Dr. Torvin finally agreed to the bone marrow transplant, his survival instinct overriding his cultural revulsion. Alex performed the procedure while Dr. Nim and Dr. Kala watched in fascination and horror. The idea of replacing someone's essential biological functions with foreign material challenged their most basic assumptions about identity and healing. He still be himself? Dr. Kala asked quietly as Alex completed the transplant. He'll be himself with a better chance of living, Alex replied. The new bone marrow will produce healthy blood cells, but it won't change his personality, his memories, or his essential nature. Dr. Kala eventually consented to the skin graft procedure, allowing Alex to harvest healthy bark from her back to cover the burns on her torso. The aliens watched as Alex deliberately wounded an uninjured area to obtain tissue for healing an injured area, a concept that seemed to violate every principle of medical ethics they had ever learned. As the hours passed, the alien doctors began to see the results of human emergency medicine. Patients who would have died from their injuries were stabilizing. Beings who would have lost limbs to infection were keeping them thanks to aggressive surgical intervention. The human approach was working, but at a cost that the aliens found difficult to comprehend. Your people perform these procedures every day? Dr. Nim asked as Alex finished treating the last of the critical cases. Somewhere on Earth, yes, Alex replied, exhaustion clear in her voice. Emergency rooms, trauma centers, battlefield hospitals, this is what we do. The aliens fell silent, contemplating a species that had turned causing harm into an art form of healing. They had witnessed humans making impossible decisions with calm efficiency, accepting necessary suffering to prevent greater suffering, and pushing their own bodies to the limit in service of saving others. As the emergency response wound down, Alex realized that her alien colleagues had witnessed something that would change their understanding of medicine forever. They had seen a species that had transformed its biological weaknesses into medical strengths, that had made peace with causing pain in order to prevent greater pain, and that approached healing as a form of controlled violence designed to preserve life. The industrial sector disaster had become an unintended demonstration of human emergency medicine at its most extreme, showing the aliens that sometimes the most compassionate response to suffering was to accept the need to cause more suffering, in pursuit of a greater good. The recovery ward hummed with activity as Dr. Alex Rivera checked on her patients from the industrial disaster. 3 days had passed since the explosion, and the results of human emergency medicine were becoming clear. Dr. Torvin lay in a specialized bed, his slug-like form slowly returning to its normal color as the transplanted bone marrow began producing healthy blood cells. Dr. Kala rested in a photosynthetic chamber, her skin grafts beginning to integrate with her existing bark while her natural healing processes resumed their work. Dr. Nim floated nearby, her crystalline structure dim with contemplation. Since the disaster, she had been studying human medical texts with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The harmonic patterns emanating from her form had shifted into frequencies that Alex had learned indicated deep philosophical processing. I have been analyzing the mortality statistics from the explosion, Dr. Nim announced, her voice carrying undertones of amazement. Without human intervention, 67% of the casualties would have died. With human intervention, only 12% were lost. Alex paused in her examination of a healing burn patient. That's what emergency medicine is for. Getting people through the critical period when their bodies can't heal themselves. But the cost, Dr. Torvin said weakly from his bed. The trauma you inflicted, the violations of bodily integrity, the pain you caused. How do you justify such methods? Alex sat down beside his bed, her expression thoughtful. Because the alternative is watching beings die when we could have saved them. We've learned that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is cause temporary harm to prevent permanent harm. Dr. Kalla's leaves rustled with what Alex had learned was deep consideration. Your species developed these methods because you had no choice. Without natural regeneration, without harmonic healing, without photosynthetic recovery, you had to create artificial ways to heal. That's right, Alex agreed. We're fragile, so we learn to be strong. We're mortal, so we learn to fight death. We feel pain, so we learn to use pain as a diagnostic tool. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency call from the communication center. A mining ship had suffered a catastrophic accident in the asteroid belt, and the crew was requesting immediate medical assistance. Alex looked at the details and felt her blood run cold. The ship's medical bay had been destroyed, and they had casualties that would die without immediate intervention. We can reach them in 4 hours, Dr. Nim said, analyzing the trajectory data, but their injuries are severe. My harmonic healing would take days to be effective. Alex was already moving toward the emergency transport. Then we do emergency. Surgery on the ship. Field medicine with limited resources. The aliens followed her, their earlier horror now mixed with fascination. They had seen the results of human emergency medicine, but they were about to witness its most extreme application. Surgery in space under combat conditions with minimal equipment, the mining ship was a disaster zone. The crew of mixed species had been caught in a mining explosion that had collapsed several decks and exposed others to vacuum. The survivors were clustered in the remaining pressurized compartments, their injuries ranging from severe to critical. Alex set up her portable surgical suite in the ship's dining area, the only space large enough and clean enough for multiple procedures. Her alien colleagues watched as she transformed the meal preparation area into an operating theater using nothing but portable equipment and emergency supplies. The captain has internal bleeding and needs immediate surgery, Alex announced after her initial triage. The engineer has a compound fracture that needs setting and stabilization. The communications officer has severe burns that need debridement and grafting. Dr. Nim's crystalline form pulsed with anxiety. In such conditions, without proper facilities? Without sterile environments? This is what field medicine is, Alex replied, scrubbing her hands with antiseptic. We work with what we have, where we are, because waiting for perfect conditions means watching people die. The aliens observed as Alex performed surgery in conditions that would have been impossible for their species. She operated by portable light with limited instruments, while the ship's damaged systems created constant noise and vibration. Yet her hands remained steady, her decisions clear and decisive. You accept imperfection in order to achieve results, Dr. Torvin observed, his radiation-weakened voice carrying new understanding. Your medicine is not about perfect healing, but about practical healing. Every patient we save is a victory, Alex said while suturing an internal injury. Every life preserved is worth the imperfect conditions, the necessary trauma, the temporary suffering. Dr. Kalla watched intently as Alex worked on the burned communications officer, using skin grafts harvested from the patient's own unburned areas. You are teaching damaged tissue to heal by giving it healthy tissue to learn from. That's one way to think about it, Alex agreed. We're giving the body the tools it needs to heal itself, even if those tools come from causing more injury first. The breakthrough came when Dr. Nim began to understand the philosophical foundation of human medicine. Your people have accepted that perfection is the enemy of good. You choose effective over elegant, practical over pure. We choose life over death, Alex corrected gently. Everything else is secondary. The aliens began to see human medicine not as barbaric violence but as a form of compassionate pragmatism. Humans had taken their biological limitations and transformed them into medical advantages. Their lack of natural healing had forced them to develop artificial healing that was more versatile and faster than what any naturally healing species could achieve. Dr. Torvin's voice was stronger now, his new bone marrow working effectively. Your species has turned weakness into strength through refusal to accept defeat. We've turned weakness into strength through accepting necessary sacrifice, Alex replied. We're willing to cause harm to prevent greater harm, to accept pain, to prevent greater pain. As the surgical procedures continued, the aliens witnessed something that fundamentally changed their understanding of medicine and healing. They saw humans making impossible decisions with calm efficiency, working under terrible conditions to save lives, and accepting the burden of causing suffering in order to prevent greater suffering. Dr. Kala's bark had returned to its normal color, her skin grafts now fully integrated. Your medicine is not about avoiding harm, but about controlling harm for positive ends. We've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hurt someone to help them, Alex said. A surgeon's knife can be an instrument of compassion. The mining ship rescue operation lasted 18 hours, during which Alex and her team saved lives under conditions that would have been impossible for the aliens' gentler healing methods. The survivors were stabilized, their injuries treated, and their lives preserved through what the aliens now recognized as controlled medical violence in service of life. As they returned to the station, Dr. Nim's crystalline form glowed with new understanding. Your species has achieved something remarkable. You have made peace with causing pain in order to prevent greater pain. You have turned medical necessity into medical virtue. We've learned that healing and harming are not opposites, Alex replied. Sometimes they're the same thing, seen from different perspectives. The aliens had witnessed the ultimate expression of human medical philosophy, the willingness to accept the burden of causing suffering in order to preserve life. They had seen a species that had transformed its biological vulnerabilities into medical strengths, that had made causing harm into an act of love, and that had turned the necessity of painful healing into a virtue of compassionate care. The revelation was complete. Human medicine was not barbaric but brilliant, not violent but loving, not primitive but advanced in ways that naturally healing species could never achieve. The aliens had learned that sometimes the most compassionate response to suffering was to accept the need to cause more suffering in pursuit of a greater good. The medical conference room had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Representatives from 12 different species sat around a circular table, their various forms of communication creating a complex symphony of light, sound, and chemical signals. Dr. Alex Rivera looked around the room with satisfaction, knowing that this moment represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached healing and medicine. 2 weeks had passed since the mining ship rescue, and word had spread throughout the civilized systems about the human medical techniques that had saved lives under impossible conditions. Species that had previously viewed human medicine as primitive barbarism were now requesting detailed information about surgical procedures, emergency protocols, and trauma response systems. Dr. Nim had become the most vocal advocate for what was now being called interventionist medicine. Her crystalline form pulsed with excitement as she addressed the assembled delegates. The humans have shown us that healing is not always gentle, that medicine is not always comfortable, and that sometimes the most compassionate response to suffering is to accept the need to cause controlled suffering in pursuit of a greater good. The response from the other species was mixed but respectful. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who had never experienced physical trauma, struggled to understand the concept of cutting into flesh to heal it. The hive mind species questioned how individual medical decisions could be made without consensus from the collective consciousness. Yet all of them had studied the mortality statistics from the recent emergencies, and the results were impossible to ignore. Dr. Torvin had made a full recovery from his radiation poisoning, his new bone marrow producing healthy blood cells with an efficiency that his natural systems had never achieved. He addressed the conference with newfound respect for human medical philosophy. I initially viewed the bone marrow transplant as a violation of my essential nature. Now I understand that it was an expansion of my essential nature. The human medical team did not make me less myself. They made it possible for me to continue being myself. Dr. Kala's bark showed the faint scars where skin grafts had been harvested, but her photosynthetic processes were now more efficient than they had been before the accident. The humans taught damaged tissue to heal by providing it with healthy tissue to learn from. This is not destruction, it is education at the cellular level. The conference had been organized to establish new medical protocols that would combine the gentle healing methods of various species with human interventionist techniques. Alex found herself at the center of discussions that would reshape galactic medicine for generations to come. We propose a tiered response system, Alex explained to the assembled delegates. For minor injuries and stable conditions, we use the natural healing methods that each species has developed. For emergency situations where time is critical, we employ human surgical techniques to stabilize patients, then transition to gentler healing methods for recovery. The proposal was revolutionary. Species that had viewed cutting into living beings as the ultimate violation were now requesting training in surgical techniques. The Crystalline Healer Guild wanted to learn how to perform precision cuts in crystal matrix structures. The Regenerative Collective was interested in amputation techniques to speed up their natural regrowth processes. A delegate from the Photosynthetic Alliance raised concerns about the psychological impact of interventionist medicine. How do your people cope with the trauma of deliberately harming others, even for healing purposes? Alex had anticipated this question. We train extensively in medical ethics and psychological preparation. Medical students learn not just the technical skills of surgery, but also the emotional skills needed to cause necessary harm without becoming callous or cruel. We have support systems for medical personnel to help them process the psychological burden of their work. Dr. Nim's harmonic field resonated with understanding. The humans have created not just a medical system, but a philosophical framework for accepting the burden of causing suffering in service of preventing greater suffering. This is perhaps their greatest achievement. The discussion turned to specific applications of human techniques to alien physiology. The energy beings wanted to know if surgical concepts could be applied to their plasma-based forms. The silicon-based collective was interested in how human bone-setting techniques might work with their crystalline skeletons. Each species saw potential applications for interventionist medicine within their own biological systems. The key principle, Alex emphasized, is that the harm we cause must always be less than the harm we prevent. Every cut, every procedure, every intervention must be justified by the greater good it achieves. As the conference progressed, Alex realized that something extraordinary was happening. The galaxy's medical community was not just adopting human techniques, they were embracing human medical philosophy. Species that had evolved gentle healing methods were learning to accept that sometimes gentleness was not enough, that sometimes love required violence, and that sometimes the most compassionate response to suffering was to cause controlled suffering in pursuit of healing. The formal agreements reached at the conference established the first interspecies medical protocol, combining the healing traditions of dozens of species into a comprehensive approach to galactic healthcare. Emergency response teams would include both human surgical specialists and alien healing experts. Medical training programs would teach both interventionist and naturalist techniques to practitioners from all species. Dr. Nim approached Alex as the conference concluded, her crystalline form glowing with deep satisfaction. Your species has given us something we never knew we needed. You have shown us that there are different forms of courage in medicine, different expressions of compassion in healing. You've given us something too, Alex replied. You've shown us that healing doesn't always have to involve trauma, that medicine can be gentle and effective. We're all better healers when we work together. The mining ship survivors had been invited to attend the final session of the conference, and their testimonials provided powerful evidence of the effectiveness of combined medical approaches. The captain spoke of how human surgery had saved his life, while resonary harmonic healing had eliminated his surgical scars. The engineer described how human bone setting had realigned his fractures, while Mallory regenerative secretions had strengthened the healed bones beyond their original capacity. The humans did not just save our lives, the communications officer said. Her burns now completely healed thanks to the combination of human skin grafts and photosynthetic healing compounds. They showed us that healing is not about avoiding all harm, but about accepting necessary harm to prevent greater harm. As the delegates prepared to return to their home systems, each carried with them new medical protocols that would revolutionize healthcare throughout the galaxy. Human surgical techniques would be taught alongside traditional healing methods. Emergency response protocols would include both interventionist and naturalist approaches. The rigid barriers between different medical philosophies had been replaced, with flexible systems that could adapt to any emergency. Alex stood on the observation deck, watching the various ships depart for their home systems. Each vessel carried medical teams trained in the new integrated protocols, equipped with both human surgical instruments and alien healing technologies. The galaxy would never be the same. Dr. Torvin joined her at the viewport, his fully recovered form moving with new vitality. Your species has taught us that strength can come from accepting weakness, that healing can require harming, and that love sometimes demands violence. Your species taught us that healing can be beautiful, Alex replied. That medicine doesn't always have to be traumatic, that gentleness has its own power. The medical bay that had once housed only alien healing technology now contained surgical suites alongside harmonic resonance chambers, photosynthetic healing stations, and regenerative treatment pools. Human doctors worked beside alien healers, their different approaches complementing rather than competing with each other. As the weeks passed, reports began arriving from across the galaxy of successful medical interventions using the new integrated protocols. A crystalline healer had saved a shattered colleague using human surgical techniques followed by harmonic regeneration. A human trauma surgeon had treated a photosynthetic patient using skin grafts combined with light therapy. The regenerative collective had successfully treated radiation poisoning using modified bone marrow transplant techniques. The universe had learned that there were many paths to healing, many expressions of medical compassion, and many ways to fight the universal enemy of suffering and death. Human medicine had not replaced alien healing traditions but had joined them, creating a comprehensive approach to healthcare that drew on the strengths of every species. In the end, the aliens had learned that human emergency medicine was not barbaric violence disguised as healing, but rather the ultimate expression of a species' refusal to accept death without a fight. They had discovered that causing controlled harm to prevent greater harm was not cruelty but compassion, not violence but love expressed through different means. The galaxy had become a safer place, not because any single species had imposed their medical traditions on others, but because all species had learned to work together, combining their different strengths to create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The humans had given the gift of interventionist medicine while receiving the gift of gentle healing in return. Alex smiled as she watched the station's daily life continue around her. Beings from dozens of species working together in ways that had been impossible just months before. The medical revolution had taught them all that healing was not about perfection but about effectiveness, not about avoiding all harm but about preventing the greatest harm, and not about individual superiority but about collective compassion in the face of universal suffering.